The cargo bay of the merchant vessel, Stellar Wanderer buzzed with the usual chatter of a mixed crew. Aliens from a dozen different species worked side by side, their conversations creating a symphony of clicks, growls, and melodic tones that filled the vast metal chamber. Among them moved a single human figure, silent as a shadow. Marcus Chen appeared unremarkable by human standards. Average height, lean build, with dark hair that had seen better days and clothes that spoke of practical functionality over fashion. He moved through his duties with mechanical precision, loading containers, checking manifest numbers, and maintaining the ship's cargo systems without ever speaking unless directly addressed. When he did respond, it was always brief, polite, and to the point. The other crew members had grown accustomed to his presence over the past 3 months since he'd signed on at Kepler Station. To them, he was simply another human laborer, probably running from debt or a failed relationship back on Earth. Humans were common enough in this sector of space, usually working menial jobs on trade routes far from their homeworld. Zakthor, a massive Krillian with chitinous armor and 4 powerful arms, watched Marcus stack cargo containers with apparent ease. The containers each weighed nearly 200 kilograms, yet the human lifted them as if they were empty boxes. Zakthor's mandibles clicked in amusement as he turned to his companion, a serpentine Vashiti female named Celia. "Look at the quiet monkey," Zakthor rumbled in galactic standard, his voice carrying across the cargo bay. "Still pretending he belongs here with real workers." Celia's scaled head swiveled toward Marcus, her forked tongue tasting the air. "I heard humans are naturally weak. Maybe this one uses illegal enhancement drugs to keep up." Their conversation drew the attention of other crew members. A group of Corvan traders paused their own work to watch, their crystalline features reflecting the cargo bay's harsh lighting. Even Pip, the ship's Quellan engineer, poked his furry head out from behind a maintenance panel to observe. Marcus continued his work, showing no sign that he'd heard their comments. His face remained impassive, focused entirely on the task at hand. This apparent indifference only seemed to encourage the aliens further. "Maybe he's deaf," suggested one of the Corvans, his voice like breaking glass. "Or perhaps humans are simply too primitive to understand when they're being insulted." Zakthor's laughter boomed through the cargo bay. "I heard they evolved from tree-dwelling creatures, still act like frightened animals when real predators are around." The taunting had begun shortly after Marcus joined the crew. At first, it was subtle, whispered comments about human inferiority, jokes about their soft skin and lack of natural weapons. But as days turned to weeks, the harassment grew bolder. The aliens seemed to interpret Marcus's silence as weakness, feeding their sense of superiority. Captain Veltar, a distinguished Altarian with golden skin and elegant features, occasionally passed through the cargo bay during these incidents. Her expression suggested disapproval, but she never intervened directly. Maintaining crew morale was delicate business on long-haul trade runs, and minor friction was considered normal. As long as the work got done and no one filed formal complaints, she preferred to let the crew sort out their own dynamics. What none of them knew was that Marcus heard everything. His enhanced hearing, a gift from years of specialized training, picked up conversations 3 decks away. He understood not just galactic standard, but 15 other languages spoken by various crew members. Their whispered insults, crude jokes, and speculation about his background were as clear to him as if they were shouting directly in his face. But Marcus had learned patience long before he'd learned to kill. His current identity as a cargo handler was just another mission parameter, another role to maintain until his real objective was complete. The targeting data hidden in his neural implants indicated his quarry was somewhere in this sector, and the Stellar Wanderer's trade route would eventually bring him within striking distance. The harassment escalated during the 3rd month of his employment. It started when Zakthor accidentally bumped into Marcus while carrying a massive beam, sending the human sprawling across the cargo bay floor. Marcus picked himself up without comment, dusted off his coveralls, and returned to work. The watching aliens interpreted this as cowardice. "Typical human," Celia hissed, her voice dripping with contempt. "No spine, no honor, just weakness disguised as civilization." Zakthor flexed his 4 arms, each one capable of crushing Marcus's skull like an egg. "On Krylos, we would cast such weaklings into the volcanic pits. Natural selection demands the strong eliminate the weak." The taunting became a daily ritual. Aliens would deliberately block Marcus's path, force him to work double shifts, or accidentally damage equipment he'd just finished repairing. They spoke about him as if he weren't there, discussing human anatomy, their supposed cowardice in battle, and their alleged lack of honor codes. Marcus absorbed it all in silence. His training had prepared him for far worse than verbal abuse and petty harassment. During his time with the regiment, he'd endured interrogation techniques that would shatter most minds, survived in hostile environments that would kill ordinary humans within hours, and eliminated targets in scenarios that existed beyond most people's nightmares. But his fellow crew members saw only what he allowed them to see, a quiet human who accepted their treatment without complaint. They began to view him with increasing contempt, as if his very presence insulted their concepts of strength and courage. The situation reached a turning point during a routine cargo transfer at Nexus 7, a massive trading station that served as a hub for merchant traffic throughout the sector. The crew had shore leave while the ship's cargo was being unloaded and replaced, and most of the aliens headed for the station's entertainment district to spend their wages on alcohol, gambling, and other diversions. Marcus remained aboard, ostensibly to oversee the cargo transfer, but actually to maintain his cover. His target wasn't on this station, but intelligence suggested they would be moving through this region within the next few weeks. Patience was a weapon as sharp as any blade, and Marcus had learned to wield it with surgical precision. Zakthor and several other crew members returned to the ship in the early hours of the station's night cycle, heavily intoxicated on Altarian wine and spoiling for entertainment. They found Marcus in the cargo bay, running diagnostic checks on the environmental systems. "Look who's still here," Zakthor slurred, his 4 arms weaving unsteadily. "The faithful little human, working while his betters enjoy themselves." Celia coiled behind him, her movements more fluid despite the alcohol in her system. "Maybe he has nowhere else to go. Probably banned from decent establishments for being human." The group surrounded Marcus, who continued his work without acknowledging their presence. This apparent dismissal inflamed their alcohol-fueled pride. "We're talking to you, monkey," snarled one of the Corvins, his crystalline features sharp with malice. "The least you could do is show proper respect to your superiors." Marcus finally looked up from his diagnostic tablet, his expression neutral. "Is there something you need assistance with?" His calm, professional tone seemed to enrage them further. Zakthor stepped closer, using his massive frame to loom over the human. "Assistance?" The Krillian's mandibles clicked with amusement. "Maybe you could assist us in understanding how such a pathetic species managed to spread across the galaxy. Do your people breed like insects to compensate for individual weakness?" The other aliens laughed, emboldened by their numbers and intoxication. They began circling Marcus like predators around wounded prey, their comments growing increasingly vicious. Marcus set down his tablet with careful precision. His movements were deliberate, controlled, as if he were performing a practiced ritual. Something flickered in his eyes, so briefly that the aliens missed it entirely, but unmistakably present for anyone trained to recognize such things. For just an instant, the quiet cargo handler was gone, replaced by something far more dangerous. Then the moment passed, and Marcus was once again the silent human they thought they knew. "If you'll excuse me," he said politely, "I need to complete these diagnostics before the next shift begins." He moved to step around Zakthor, but the massive alien blocked his path. I don't think so, human. We're not finished with our conversation. The temperature in the cargo bay seemed to drop several degrees. Marcus stopped moving, his body going perfectly still in a way that should have triggered every survival instinct the aliens possessed. But they were too drunk, too confident in their perceived superiority to notice the change. "Please move aside," Marcus said, his voice carrying no emotion whatsoever. It was the same tone he'd used when requesting permission to fire in situations where collateral damage was acceptable. The same voice that had spoken the last words hundreds of targets had ever heard. But to the aliens, it sounded like begging. Zack Thor's massive hand shot out toward Marcus's shoulder, intending to shove the human backward into a stack of cargo containers. It was meant to be another humiliation, another demonstration of human weakness for the entertainment of his companions. The hand never made contact. Marcus moved with a speed that defied physics as the aliens understood them. One moment he stood motionless before Zack Thor, the next he was 3 meters away, having somehow flowed around the Krillian's reach like water around a stone. The movement was so fluid, so economical, that it seemed almost supernatural. Zack Thor stumbled forward, his alcohol-impaired reflexes unable to compensate for the sudden absence of expected resistance. He crashed into the cargo containers, his chitinous armor scraping against metal with a sound like breaking glass. "Impossible," breathed Celia, her serpentine form coiling defensively. "Humans cannot move that fast." Marcus stood in his new position, hands at his sides, expression unchanged. "The diagnostics won't complete themselves. I would appreciate being allowed to finish my work." But the aliens were no longer interested in simple harassment. What they had witnessed challenged their fundamental understanding of human capabilities. Zack Thor pulled himself upright, his 4 eyes burning with humiliation and rage. "Trickery," he snarled, though uncertainty crept into his voice. "Some kind of technological enhancement." The Corvan who had spoken earlier stepped forward, his crystalline features catching the cargo bay's harsh lighting. "Scan him," he suggested to Celia. "Vashati can detect augmentations through body heat patterns." Celia's forked tongue flicked out, tasting the air around Marcus. Her serpentine head weaved back and forth as she analyzed what her enhanced senses told her. After a long moment, she recoiled as if struck. "Impossible," she whispered. "He reads as baseline human. No augmentations, no technological enhancements. But his body temperature is completely stable, his heart rate hasn't changed, and his scent carries no fear markers. This information should have warned them away. Any rational predator would recognize that prey which showed no fear in the face of overwhelming odds was either insane or far more dangerous than it appeared. But pride and alcohol clouded their judgment. "Then he's hiding something," Zack Thor declared, advancing again. "No human moves like that without assistance. We'll beat the truth out of him." Marcus sighed, the sound barely audible. "Please don't do this." To the aliens, it sounded like a plea. They heard weakness and desperation, confirmation of their assumptions about human nature. What they missed was the subtle change in Marcus's stance, the way his weight shifted almost imperceptibly onto the balls of his feet, or how his hands, still hanging loosely at his sides, had positioned themselves for maximum efficiency. 3 months of maintaining his cover were about to be wasted, but Marcus had learned long ago that some situations allowed no perfect solutions. The aliens had chosen their path when they decided that his restraint was weakness rather than professionalism. Zack Thor lunged forward with all 4 arms spread wide, intending to grapple the human and demonstrate Krillian superiority through raw strength. He was fast for his size, his massive frame moving with surprising coordination. Marcus stepped inside the alien's reach and struck once. A precise blow to a nerve cluster just below Zack Thor's primary respiratory opening. The Krillian's charge turned into an uncontrolled tumble as his entire nervous system temporarily shut down. He hit the deck with a sound like a landslide, his forearms twitching spasmodically as his brain tried to reconnect with his body. The other aliens stared in stunned silence. Zakthor was a veteran of the Krillian military, trained in their traditional combat arts and possessing the natural advantages of his species. For him to be defeated so easily was beyond their comprehension. Pressure point, Marcus explained calmly, as if he were discussing cargo manifests. He'll recover in a few minutes with no permanent damage. But the aliens weren't listening to his words. They were watching his posture, the way he stood balanced and ready, and slowly beginning to understand that they had made a terrible miscalculation. Celia recovered first, her predator's instincts overriding her shock. She launched herself forward in a sinuous strike, her flexible body allowing her to attack from an unexpected angle while her venomous fangs extended for a killing bite. Marcus caught her by the throat mid-strike, his hand closing around her neck with just enough pressure to stop her momentum without crushing her windpipe. She writhed in his grasp, powerful muscles straining against his hold, but couldn't break free. Vashati physiology, Marcus said conversationally, as if he were conducting a lecture. Muscular, but dependent on maintaining specific blood flow to the brain. Apply pressure here, his thumb shifted slightly, and consciousness becomes difficult to maintain. Celia's struggles weakened as oxygen flow to her brain decreased. Marcus lowered her gently to the deck, releasing his hold at precisely the moment before permanent damage would occur. She lay gasping, alive but helpless. The remaining aliens, 3 Corvins and Pip the Quellan, backed away from Marcus with growing terror. What they had witnessed violated everything they believed about human limitations. "What are you?" whispered the lead Corvin, his crystalline voice cracking with fear. Marcus considered the question seriously. "Cargo Specialist Marcus Chen," he replied. "Employee identification number 7749 Delta, assigned to this vessel for standard commercial transport duties." "Impossible," the Corvin protested. "No human possesses such capabilities." Marcus tilted his head slightly, as if puzzled by their confusion. "I believe you may have some misconceptions about human physiology. We're quite capable when properly motivated." The truth was far more complex, but Marcus saw no reason to enlighten them. His background with the Human Colonial Defense Force's Special Operations Division was classified at levels that officially didn't exist. The enhancement programs, the training that had reshaped his body and mind into a living weapon, the psychological conditioning that allowed him to function in situations that would destroy normal humans, none of that was information he could share. Instead, he knelt beside Zakthor, whose breathing was beginning to normalize. "Your friend will experience some disorientation and muscle weakness for the next hour. I recommend medical attention to ensure no complications develop." The concern in his voice seemed genuine, which only added to the alien's confusion. How could someone who had just demonstrated such lethal efficiency show real worry for his attacker's well-being? Pip, the small Quellan engineer, found his voice first. "Why didn't you fight back before? You could have stopped their harassment at any time." Marcus looked up from his examination of Zakthor. "Because violence should be the last resort, not the first response to social friction. I hoped the situation would resolve itself through natural crew dynamics." "But they were hurting you," Pip pressed, "humiliating you daily." "Words cannot cause physical harm," Marcus replied. "Physical assault, however, requires an appropriate response." The distinction seemed important to him, though the aliens struggled to understand its significance. In their cultures, challenges to status and honor demanded immediate retaliation. The idea of enduring insults while maintaining restraint was alien to their thinking. Captain Veltar's voice echoed through the cargo bay's communication system. All crew to stations. We're departing Nexus 7 in 30 minutes. Marcus stood smoothly, retrieving his diagnostic tablet from where he'd set it down. I need to finish these system checks. I would appreciate it if you could help your companions to the medical bay. He turned back to his work as if nothing had happened, his movements calm and precise. The aliens remained frozen in place, struggling to process what they had witnessed. The quiet human they had tormented for months was gone, replaced by someone, or something, that challenged their understanding of reality. Yet he continued to behave with the same professional courtesy he'd always shown, as if the brief display of lethal capability was merely another work-related task. Celia managed to push herself into a sitting position, her throat bearing finger-shaped bruises. "The captain needs to know," she croaked. The lead Corvin helped her stand while the others assisted the still groggy Zackthor. "Know what? That we attacked a crew member and got ourselves defeated. That we've been harassing someone who could have killed us at any time but chose not to." The implications were staggering. If Marcus possessed such abilities, what else might humans be capable of? Their entire understanding of the species was built on observations of merchants, laborers, and other civilians encountered in commercial settings. But what if those humans were not representative of their species' true potential? As they helped their injured companions toward the medical bay, the aliens cast nervous glances back at Marcus. He worked with the same quiet efficiency he'd always shown, but now they saw it differently. Every movement seemed calculated, every gesture potentially deadly. The silence they had interpreted as weakness now felt heavy with unspoken threats. Word spread quickly through the ship's crew. By the time the Stellar Wanderer cleared Nexus 7's gravitational field, every alien aboard knew that the quiet human was far more than he appeared. Conversations fell silent when Marcus entered a room, and crew members found urgent business elsewhere whenever he approached. But Marcus continued his duties as if nothing had changed. He completed his diagnostics, filed his reports, and prepared for the next phase of their journey with the same professional dedication he'd always shown. Only now, the aliens were beginning to wonder what other surprises humans might be hiding among the stars. The atmosphere aboard the Stellar Wanderer had changed completely. Where once there had been casual camaraderie and the rough humor common to merchant crews, now there was tension thick enough to cut with a blade. Conversations stopped when Marcus entered a room, and crew members found urgent tasks that required their immediate attention elsewhere. Captain Veltar called him to her ready room 3 days after the incident in the cargo bay. The elegant Altarian sat behind her desk, her golden features composed, but her eyes sharp with intelligence and concern. "Sit down, Marcus," she said, gesturing to the chair across from her. Marcus took the offered seat, his posture relaxed but alert. "Is there a problem with my performance, Captain?" "Your work remains exemplary," Veltar replied carefully, "but I've received some disturbing reports about an altercation in the cargo bay. Care to explain what happened?" "Several crew members became intoxicated during shore leave and initiated a physical confrontation," Marcus said, his tone matter-of-fact. "I defended myself using minimal necessary force. No permanent injuries were sustained." Veltar leaned back in her chair, studying him intently. "According to witnesses, you defeated Zackthor and Celia simultaneously. Both trained warriors from species known for their combat prowess. That's not something a typical human cargo specialist should be capable of." "I may have been understated in my employment application," Marcus admitted. "I have some background in personal defense." "Some background," Veltar repeated slowly. "Marcus, I've been commanding merchant vessels for 23 years. I've seen humans in action before, traders, diplomats, even some with military experience. None of them moved like you did." Marcus remained silent, understanding that anything he said now would only raise more questions he couldn't answer truthfully. Veltar activated a privacy screen around her desk, ensuring their conversation couldn't be monitored or overheard. "Who are you, really?" "Cargo Specialist Marcus Chen," he replied without hesitation. "My identification and work permits are all legitimate." "Your papers may be genuine, but they're not complete," Veltar said. "I ran a deeper background check after the incident. Your employment history only goes back 2 years. Before that, it's as if you didn't exist." This was dangerous territory. Marcus's cover identity had been crafted by the best intelligence specialists in human space, but under intensive scrutiny, any legend eventually showed cracks. The captain was clearly more observant than he'd initially assessed. "I prefer to keep my past private," Marcus said. "Many humans do when working this far from Earth." "Running from something?" Veltar asked. "Debt? Legal trouble? Failed relationships?" "Something like that." Veltar studied him for a long moment, then made a decision. "I don't care what you did before joining my crew as long as it doesn't endanger my ship or the people under my command. But I need to know, are there others like you?" The question struck at the heart of everything Marcus couldn't reveal. The regiment was humanity's most closely guarded secret, an organization that didn't officially exist, but whose members operated throughout known space. Their missions ranged from intelligence gathering to direct action against threats to human interests, and their training produced individuals capable of functioning far beyond normal human limits. "I'm just one person," Marcus said carefully. "My capabilities are my own." "That's not what I asked," Veltar pressed. "The galactic community has certain assumptions about human limitations. If those assumptions are wrong, if there are more humans with your abilities, then the balance of power in this region could be very different than anyone realizes." She was perceptive. Marcus had to give her that. The Altarians were known for their diplomatic skills and strategic thinking, qualities that had made them successful mediators in interstellar disputes. Veltar was clearly applying those same analytical abilities to the puzzle he represented. "The galaxy is a large place," Marcus said diplomatically. "I imagine there are many individuals of various species whose capabilities exceed typical parameters." "Stop deflecting," Veltar said sharply. "I've been watching you since you came aboard, and now I'm seeing things that were always there, but I didn't understand their significance. The way you move through the ship, you know every corridor, every maintenance shaft, every potential choke point. You've memorized our security protocols, crew rotations, and emergency procedures in detail that goes far beyond job requirements. That's not curiosity, Marcus. That's professional reconnaissance." Marcus felt a flicker of respect for the captain's observational skills. She was right, of course. His training made it impossible for him to exist in any environment without thoroughly mapping its strategic significance. Even when trying to maintain a low profile, he automatically gathered intelligence and identified tactical advantages. "I like to be thorough in my work," he said. "And the way you handle equipment," Veltar continued. "You know the specifications and capabilities of systems you've never officially worked with. Last week, you identified a potential malfunction in our navigation array before our sensors registered any problems. That kind of technical knowledge doesn't come from cargo handling experience." She was building a comprehensive case against his cover story, piece by piece. Marcus realized he would need to give her something closer to the truth if he wanted to maintain his position aboard the ship. "I may have more technical background than my employment records indicate," he conceded. "Military?" Veltar asked immediately. Marcus nodded slowly. "Former colonial defense. Classified specialization." "That explains the combat training," Veltar said, "but not the level of capability you demonstrated. Colonial defense units are known for their competence. But what you did in the cargo bay was beyond anything in their standard training protocols." She was right again. Standard colonial defense training produced excellent soldiers, but nothing approaching his capabilities. The regiment operated on an entirely different level, with resources and methods that would shock even other military organizations. Special circumstances required special training, Marcus said simply. Veltar leaned forward, her golden eyes intense. What kind of special circumstances? Before Marcus could respond, the ship's alert klaxons began wailing. Emergency lighting bathed the ready room in red as automated announcements echoed through the corridors. All hands to battle stations. Unknown vessels approaching on attack vectors. This is not a drill. Captain Veltar was on her feet instantly, their conversation forgotten in the face of immediate danger. "Get to your emergency station," she ordered Marcus as she headed for the bridge. Marcus followed her into the corridor, where crew members were running toward their assigned positions with the practiced efficiency of experienced spacers. But his enhanced hearing picked up something the others missed, the distinctive whine of military-grade engines running at combat speeds. His neural implants activated automatically, analyzing the acoustic signature and comparing it to known threats. The identification came back immediately, sending ice through his veins. Zytherian raiders. His target had found him instead. The Zytherians were a nomadic species that had turned piracy into an art form, but these weren't ordinary raiders. The engine signatures matched vessels from the Crimson Fleet, an organization that had been Marcus's primary objective for the past 18 months. Their leader, a Zytherian warlord known as Kreshata the Blood Drinker, was responsible for attacks on 3 human colonies and the destruction of 2 diplomatic missions. Marcus had been tracking Kreshata through intelligence networks and informants, following a trail of violence across the outer systems. The merchant route he'd chosen was supposed to intercept the warlord's projected path, but he'd expected to be the hunter, not the prey. The ship shuddered as something impacted their shields, followed by the distinctive sound of military-grade weapons fire. Through the corridors, Marcus could hear crew members shouting updates and damage reports. "Shields at 60% and falling. Multiple contacts. At least 4 vessels in attack formation. They're jamming our distress beacons." Marcus reached his assigned emergency station in the cargo bay, but his mind was already shifting into combat mode. The merchant vessel was heavily shielded but lightly armed, designed for trade rather than warfare. Against military raiders, especially Kreshta's veterans, the Stellar Wanderer wouldn't last long. His cover identity was about to become irrelevant. If he wanted to survive, if he wanted any of them to survive, Marcus would have to reveal exactly what he was capable of. The ship shuddered again under sustained fire, and the lights flickered as power systems strained to maintain shield integrity. Over the intercom, Captain Veltar's voice carried a note of controlled desperation. "All crew, prepare for possible boarding action. Arm yourselves with whatever you can find and defend your positions." Marcus looked around the cargo bay, where his fellow workers were frantically searching for anything that could serve as a weapon. Pip the Quellan had found a plasma cutter, while the Corvins were breaking open emergency supply crates looking for tools they could use. None of them noticed Marcus moving toward a specific cargo container, one that had been loaded at their last port and sealed with his personal authorization code. His fingers moved over the lock mechanism with practiced efficiency, entering a sequence that would either validate his identity or trigger a small explosive charge that would destroy the container's contents. The lock disengaged with a soft click. Inside, nestled in adaptive foam that had protected it from scans and casual inspection, lay Marcus's true equipment. Military-grade armor that could stop most small arms fire. Weapons designed for close-quarters combat against multiple opponents. Communication gear that could reach human intelligence networks across vast distances. And most importantly, his commission papers identifying him as Colonel Marcus Chen, 3rd Regiment, Human Colonial Defense Force Special Operations Division. The time for hiding was over. The Reaper was about to reveal himself, The transformation was swift and terrifying to witness. Marcus shed his civilian coveralls like a snake shedding old skin, revealing the lean, scarred physique beneath. The military armor went on with practiced efficiency, each piece fitting perfectly as magnetic locks engaged with soft clicks. In less than 60 seconds, the quiet cargo handler had become something else entirely. The other crew members in the cargo bay stared in stunned silence as Marcus checked his weapons with the fluid motions of long experience. The pistol at his hip was clearly military issue, its design unlike anything they'd seen in civilian hands. The knife on his chest harness had an edge that seemed to drink light, suggesting molecular sharpening technology that was restricted to elite forces. "What are you?" Pip whispered, his furry features pale with shock. "Someone who's very good at killing Zetherians," Marcus replied, his voice carrying a cold edge that hadn't been there before. The mild-mannered cargo specialist was gone, replaced by a predator preparing for the hunt. The ship shuddered again under sustained weapons fire, and emergency lighting cast everything in hellish red. Over the intercom, damage reports painted a grim picture of their situation. "Hull breach on Deck 3. Emergency bulkheads are holding. Engines are down to 40%. They're moving into boarding position." Marcus activated his communication gear, sending an encrypted signal on frequencies that didn't officially exist. The response came back immediately. Confirmation codes that identified him as active military and authorized him to take whatever action necessary to complete his mission. Captain Veltar's voice crackled through the intercom, tight with controlled panic. "All crew, prepare for boarding. They're cutting through the airlock seals." Marcus moved toward the cargo bay's main entrance, his movements now carrying the lethal precision his training had ingrained. The aliens backed away from him instinctively, recognizing an apex predator when they saw one. "Stay here," he told them. "Seal the blast doors behind me and don't open them for anyone who doesn't know the phrase thunder from clear skies." "You can't fight an entire boarding party alone," Celia protested, her voice still hoarse from their earlier encounter. "Even humans have limits." Marcus paused at the doorway, looking back at her with something that might have been amusement. "You still don't understand what humans are capable of when we stop pretending to be civilized." The blast doors sealed behind him with a solid thunk, leaving the aliens alone with their fear and confusion. In the corridor beyond, Marcus moved through the ship like a ghost, his enhanced senses mapping the location of friends and enemies with supernatural precision. The Zetherian boarding party had broken through the main airlock and was advancing through the ship in a classic pincer movement. Their biosignatures were distinct from the crew, larger, more aggressive, with the particular heat patterns that marked their species. Marcus counted at least 20 hostiles, all heavily armed and moving with military discipline. He intercepted the first group at a corridor junction near the ship's central hub. 5 Zetherians in powered armor, their reptilian features hidden behind tactical masks, advanced with weapons ready. They expected to face panicked civilians and possibly a few security personnel with basic training. They were not prepared for the Reaper. Marcus struck from above, dropping from a maintenance shaft like a falling shadow. His knife found the gap between armor plates on the first raider's neck, severing the spinal cord with surgical precision. The Zetherian dropped without a sound, his nervous system shutting down before his brain could process what had happened. The others spun toward the threat, but Marcus was already moving. His pistol spoke twice in rapid succession, hyper-velocity rounds punching through armor with contemptuous ease. 2 more raiders collapsed, their advanced protection useless against weapons designed to defeat such defenses. The remaining 2 opened fire with automatic weapons, filling the corridor with deadly energy bolts. But Marcus wasn't where their targeting systems said he should be. He flowed between their firing solutions like liquid mercury, using their own positioning against them. A thrown knife took one through the eye slit of his helmet, while Marcus's bare hands finished the last with a move that left the raider's neck twisted at an impossible angle. 5 dead in 15 seconds. The corridor fell silent except for the distant sound of weapons fire from other parts of the ship. Marcus moved deeper into the vessel, hunting the remaining boarders with relentless efficiency. His training had taught him to read environments like books, understanding how spaces could be used to multiply his advantages. The Stellar Wanderer had become his weapon, its corridors and chambers turned into a killing ground where his enemies' numbers counted for nothing. The second group of raiders was advancing toward the bridge when Marcus found them. They moved in formation, covering each other's angles with professional competence. But they were thinking like soldiers when they needed to think like prey. Marcus cut the power to their section of the ship, plunging the corridors into darkness. The Zetherians activated night vision modes, their equipment painting the world in false colors. They couldn't see Marcus sliding through the ventilation system above them, moving with the silence that had earned him his nickname in the Special Forces community. He dropped into their midst like death itself, his knife and pistol working in perfect coordination. The raiders tried to establish a defensive perimeter, but chaos had already claimed them. In the dark, with their formation broken, they became individuals struggling against a force they couldn't understand or counter. When the emergency lighting came back online, 7 more Zetherians lay dead in the corridor. Marcus had vanished as quietly as he'd appeared, leaving only bodies and the growing realization among the survivors that they were not the apex predators they'd believed themselves to be. The remaining raiders had reached the bridge, where Captain Veltar and her senior officers had barricaded themselves behind emergency blast doors. The Zetherians were setting up cutting charges to breach the barriers when Marcus arrived. This time, he didn't bother with stealth. His reputation in certain circles had been built on the understanding that sometimes the psychological impact of direct confrontation was more valuable than tactical surprise. 8 Zetherians turned to face the lone human walking down the corridor toward them. Their weapons trained on his approaching figure, but something in his posture gave them pause. He moved without fear, without hurry, as if he were taking a casual stroll rather than advancing against overwhelming odds. "Surrender," Marcus said, his voice carrying clearly despite the distance between them. "You've already lost. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." The lead raider, distinguished by additional markings on his armor, let out a harsh laugh. "1 human against 8 warriors? Your species' arrogance knows no bounds." Marcus continued his approach, seemingly indifferent to the weapons pointed at him. "Your ship is already calling for extraction. My people are tracking your fleet movements. This was supposed to be a quick raid. But now you're trapped on a vessel with something your intelligence files warned you to avoid." "What are you talking about?" the raider leader demanded, though uncertainty crept into his voice. "Check your threat assessment databases," Marcus suggested. "Search for the designation Reaper in human military records." Even through their armor, Marcus could see the raiders' posture change as they accessed their tactical networks. The intelligence files they found painted a picture that challenged everything they thought they knew about human combat capabilities. "Impossible," one of them whispered. "The Reaper is a myth. Human propaganda." 47 confirmed kills in the Kepler incident, Marcus said conversationally, still walking toward them. 83 eliminated during the Proxima Station rescue. 312 casualties inflicted on Crescita's forces during the Titan raids. Still think I'm mythical? The raider leader's weapon wavered as the implications sank in. The human approaching them wasn't just any soldier. He was a strategic asset, a living weapon that had been deployed against their organization specifically. "You're hunting Crescita," the leader realized. "He killed civilians under a diplomatic flag," Marcus replied. "That makes him a priority target. Your attack on this vessel was just poor timing on your part." 2 of the raiders broke and ran, their nerve finally failing. Marcus let them go, They would carry word back to their fleet about what they'd encountered. And fear was often more valuable than bodies when it came to reducing future violence. The remaining 6 opened fire in a coordinated volley, their training overriding their terror. But Marcus was no longer where their weapons were pointed. He'd used their moment of hesitation to close the distance, moving with speed that seemed to violate the laws of physics. The fight was brief and brutal. Marcus's knife found gaps in armor with mechanical precision, while his pistol delivered death at point-blank range. The raiders were skilled warriors, veterans of numerous battles, but they were fighting a war they didn't understand against an enemy their culture couldn't comprehend. When the gunfire stopped, Marcus stood alone in the corridor. His armor bore scorch marks from near misses, but he was uninjured. Around him, the evidence of Zitherian military prowess lay scattered and still. The bridge blast doors opened cautiously, revealing Captain Veltar and her officers. They stared at the carnage in stunned silence, trying to reconcile the quiet cargo handler they'd known with the figure standing before them. "The boarding party is neutralized," Marcus reported, as if he were delivering a routine status update. "I recommend immediate departure from this system. The remaining raiders will likely call for reinforcements." Veltar found her voice first. "How many were there?" 23, Marcus replied. "All eliminated or fled." 23, she repeated numbly. "You killed 23 armed raiders by yourself?" Marcus began checking his weapons, ensuring they were ready for immediate use if needed. Actually, 2 escaped to carry word back to their fleet. Psychological warfare can be more effective than complete elimination in certain tactical situations. The casual way he discussed mass killing sent chills through the watching officers. This wasn't the voice of someone who enjoyed violence, but rather that of a professional who had reduced combat to a series of calculated decisions. "Who are you really?" Veltar asked again, though she suspected she already knew. Marcus holstered his pistol and looked directly at her. "Colonel Marcus Chen, 3rd Regiment Special Operations, Human Colonial Defense Force. Designation: Reaper. My mission is the elimination of the Zitherian warlord Kreshta and the destruction of his organization." The revelation hung in the air like a physical presence. The aliens who had tormented the quiet cargo handler for months now understood that they had been harassing one of humanity's most lethal operatives. The being they had dismissed as weak and cowardly was actually a strategic weapon deployed by his government against threats to human civilization. "The humans have been hiding soldiers like you among their civilian population?" one of the bridge officers asked in horrified fascination. "We go where we're needed," Marcus replied simply. "Sometimes that means operating undercover among merchant crews until our targets present themselves." Captain Veltar's mind raced through the implications. If humans were deploying Special Forces operatives as civilian merchants, what else might they be hiding? How many other assumptions about human capabilities were fundamentally wrong? "Your target," she said slowly. "Kreshta. You said this attack was poor timing." Marcus nodded. "Intelligence indicated he would be moving through this sector within the next few weeks. I was prepared to wait until he revealed himself." His expression grew colder. "But apparently he decided to come to me instead." The ship's sensors chose that moment to register new contacts dropping out of hyperspace. More Zitherian vessels, larger and more heavily armed than the raiders they'd just defeated. "Kreshta's main fleet," Marcus observed, reading the tactical display with professional interest. "He heard about the attack and came to investigate personally." "We need to run," Veltar said immediately. "Our shields are damaged. Engines are operating at partial power." "No," Marcus interrupted, his voice carrying absolute authority. "We end this here." He activated his communication gear again, sending signals that reached far beyond the immediate system. "This is Reaper 77 requesting immediate tactical support. Target identification confirmed. Authorization code Gamma 99. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Hyperspace tears opened around the Stellar Wanderer as ships emerged from the darkness between stars. Human vessels, military grade, their weapons already targeting the Zetherian fleet. "Task Force Vengeance," Marcus announced with satisfaction. "They've been tracking Crescita's movements for 6 months, waiting for my signal." The battle that followed was less a fight than an execution. The human vessels moved with coordination that spoke of extensive training and technological advantages the Zetherians couldn't match. Crescita's fleet, designed for raiding civilian targets, found themselves outgunned and outmaneuvered by enemies who had been preparing for this confrontation. When it was over, the debris field told the story of Zetherian ambitions meeting human reality. Crescita's flagship had been captured intact, its crew in custody, and its computers already being analyzed by human intelligence specialists. As the human task force took control of the situation, Marcus began the process of shedding his military identity once again. The armor went back into its concealed storage, the weapons were secured, and the mild-mannered cargo specialist began to reassert himself. But the crew of the Stellar Wanderer would never see him the same way again. They had witnessed the emergence of something that challenged their understanding of human nature, a revelation that the species they had dismissed as weak was capable of producing individuals who redefined the concept of personal combat effectiveness. Captain Veltar approached him as he finished securing his equipment. "What happens now?" "Now we complete our original trade route," Marcus replied, his voice once again carrying the professional courtesy they remembered. "I have vacation time coming, and I've always wanted to see the crystal gardens of Altair." "Just like that?" she asked incredulously. "You eliminate a major pirate organization and then go back to moving cargo?" Marcus smiled, and for a moment, they saw both sides of his nature, the deadly operative and the man who chose to serve his species in whatever capacity was required. "Someone has to keep the trade routes safe," he said simply. "And sometimes, the best way to do that is to make sure the right people are watching." As the Stellar Wanderer resumed course for its next destination, the crew worked in a new atmosphere of respect and wariness. The quiet human among them continued his duties with the same professional dedication he'd always shown. But now they understood that humanity's expansion into the galaxy was protected by guardians they had never suspected existed. Ordinary people who carried extraordinary capabilities, ready to reveal themselves when their species faced its greatest threats. The Reaper had returned to the shadows, but the galaxy would never forget that he was there.